Okay, so I got this Nintendo controller along with a Nintendo and some games from one of my friends who got it from his mom that was in a KB Toys shopping bag. And she got it from a garage sale probably well over 20 years ago. And luckily, the Nintendo worked and the one controller worked. However, this one controller did not work. And they even took duct tape, slapped it on the back of it, and wrote the word bad. So we're going to try to get it working. The first thing you're going to do is, well, I'm going to do this, but you're going to take it apart, lightly clean the contacts. They're carbon, though they really rub off very easily, so you have to be really careful. But I'm going to just lightly brush it with a toothbrush and a little bit of alcohol just to kind of get off any debris or anything. And then afterwards, I'm going to test the cable. So I'm going to go from the plug and make sure that all the wires inside the plug are going to the PCB board. If all that checks out fine, then you know basically that it's going to be this chip here. This is the CD402 1BE chip, and it's a shift registered chip from what I understand. And it basically controls how the different, when you do your inputs and you press the different buttons or pads, it basically sends that data back into the Nintendo to register it as an up, down, right, left, or one of the button pushes. So most likely, if you're getting no feedback at all from the controller, there's a decent chance it is actually this chip here. Let's take apart a bad Nintendo controller and see if we can fix it. Just clean the board with some alcohol to make sure there's no dirt or debris on it. Do not press too hard. The black strip on here is normally on here as part of the contact, so do not try to rub that off. The next thing you want to do is test the connectivity. So what I'm using here is a safety pin, and I'm basically just putting it into each one of these pinholes here on the end of the cable. And it runs to the other side of the board right here through the cable. So you can test the connectivity to make sure there isn't a short in the cable, which is possible if someone pulled on this cord really hard. So I'm basically going to go through each one. And you can see on the multimeter, I have it on continuity mode, that's actually registering that. So I know that is good. So I'm going to go through each one. And we're good on this one. We're good on that one. We're good on this one. We get a reading on it. Now I believe on these two, we will not get a reading. Don't think all these pins are actually used. I believe this one is, so let's test this one. We know that one is good. So we know the problem with this controller is not the cable itself running onto the board. It is actually connecting just fine. So the next part that we have to look at is what's going on the board itself. So if we look at the board itself, we flip it over from the back end where all the connections are to the front end, you'll see that there is a shift register chip here. And it's probably a good bet that the issue with this is this chip right here. And this one in particular is a TC4021BP chip. So if the cable itself is working fine, if the contacts are cleaned, and we already cleaned them, then the next thing to look at is this chip. It's not a bad bet to actually replace this chip. Now this is my second controller, so this one is actually working fine. I put the one that's not working on the side because the one on the side I actually replaced this chip and it was the issue. Now, the problem is when you replace this chip, unfortunately, you can't use a socket because the socket will lift this up and you won't be able to put the controller back into its case without having problems, and it'll press on the plastic and could break it in the long run. So I'm going to desolder the chip on the broken one over here. Because on this one, I already fixed the issue. I put in a socket with a new chip and it's working perfectly fine. But the plastic is kind of bowed in the middle, and so I don't want that. So I'm gonna actually replace this. I'm gonna take the socket out and put the chip directly onto the board so it'll stay flat when I put it back into the case. Okay, now that we have our controller reassembled, we're going to go ahead and test it. So here's a game, and I'm going to hit start. Game comes up, start button works. Start again. Come into the game. You can see all the directions are working. Controller is fixed. And now that the controller is working, I'm going to attempt to remove this sticker that someone put on here probably like 20 years ago. This sticker looks like it's been here for a long time. This Nintendo was picked up in a yard sale. is in really good shape on this controller. That being said, controller is pretty much back to normal.